The Nordstream pipelines. By now, Seymour Hersh and so on, we have we have so much just material that tells us what happened, including your Chancellor Scholz standing next to the President of the United States while the President says, like, oh, if Russia attacks, we're going to blow it up. We have ways to end it. And he just stands there and kind of like takes it. That's such a humiliating moment. And at the same time, I mean, the blowing up of these pipelines was clearly helping Scholz because it took the political momentum out of the wings of those few people who opposed it and said, like, open these pipelines again. So it was a help. But you can do this only so and so often in an alliance, that the alliance like kind of attacks its own members. We've seen this in the Warsaw Pact, right? The Warsaw Pact always only was used against its own members, and here we have probably the first real example of a NATO attack against its own members. How far do you think can this be pushed before it, pushes the alliance over the brink? Because I interpret Emmanuel Macron's visit to China in that light. How do you see it?
Yeah, no, I told this. See, you're from Switzerland, and you know this the drama, the theater on Wilhelm Tell. Every Swiss knows it well. And there is this scene when the dictator or the viceroy of the empire puts up his head on
a stick,
on a stick, and then he orders everyone who passes by to greet the head as though the head was the viceroy. Yeah, in that same sense, I think. Now in Germany, all the media, the politicians, everybody else has to say, these unknown Russian gangsters who blew up this wonderful pipeline. It's a humiliation even to say that, because everybody knows who blew it. And nobody else could have done it. Nobody else had a motive. What would have been the motive? Motive would have been relatively easy. Germany now cannot offer to Russia, in exchange for Russian concessions on Ukraine or whatever, cannot offer them the reopening of the pipeline because it cannot be reopened. You take an important sort of parameter of future negotiations out of the hands of your presumed ally. Yeah? And even the German, I think the office of the German federal prosecutor, now then the Americans delivered a second story, which is even more ridiculous than the first story, which is that 4 people unknown, but apparently with connections to Ukraine, on a sailboat, sort of started from a place in Germany with, I don't know, hundreds of kilograms of explosives, and on that sailboat went to the place and blew up this thing. Interestingly, that the German federal prosecutor then had to say that that was interesting information, and said it was like you greet the head, yeah.
That's Seymour Hersh's analysis, that this narrative is so dumb that it was never meant to be taken serious, but an implicit admission of guilt, so that everybody knows, and you can tell the Russians, look, we did it, and there's nothing you can do, and the Germans wouldn't even stand up. So
and the second story is interesting because of the Ukrainian thing. That Ukraine was mentioned in. I think that was a warning that they were sending to the Ukrainian government, not to be too confident that the United States will forever sort of be on their side. I still think that apart from these sort of confusions, little things that happen, the Americans are preparing to withdraw from this, which is why, and then they live scorched earth. They scorched earth behind, which means that they don't really care the damage that they do when they return, either to the German government or to the European Union or whatever. I know here that Frau von der Leyen is sort of on her way to become a General Secretary of NATO.
Oh God!
That she's going to be promoted.
Oh, spare us, please.
From the European Union to NATO. And see, these two headquarters are both in Brussels. And as I have relatively early written in this story, that part of the story of this war is the supremacy of NATO over the European Union. That the European Union is becoming sort of a sub-department of NATO. Her promotion to General Secretary of NATO would actually be the ideal way for the United States to sort of lock the European Union into the transatlantic relationship, which is probably what makes Macron extremely nervous.
I believe so. So, polemically speaking, you know, it's very famous that the first Secretary General of NATO once defined the purpose of NATO as keeping the Americans in, the Russians out, and the Germans down. Can we adjust? Can we adjust that today to say, like, the purpose is to keep the Americans in power, the Russians minimal, and Europe down?
Europe as a sort of compulsory ally in the real battle, which will be the battle in the South Pacific, and in what used to be the Chinese Sea.
Do you have any hope that somebody could help us Europeans, like, you know, South Americans, African countries, or Asian countries, could actually help us out of this satellite existence?
Yeah, you know, in a very general sense, I would say the real disaster would be a bipolar world, China and the United States, with a sort of constraint to choose sides, where in Europe the sort of Eurasian continent would be divided between Russia being a subservient ally to China, and Western Europe being a subservient ally to the United States. That's the worst scenario. A better scenario would be some multipolar world, where there would be countries like Brazil, maybe India, some people say South Africa, I don't know, who could be something like a revival. Used to be the non-aligned countries of the 1960s, then later called the Third World, in a sort of derogatory way, with Yugoslavia being very, very important in this, who did not want to be aligned with either the United States or the Soviet Union. If the world becomes sufficiently multipolar, then a European continent would have, or let's say a country like Germany and France, they would have some sort of alternative to being a servant of an ally between, let's say, Poland and the Baltics on the one hand, and the United States on the other hand. Whether this is possible it depends not just on Europe, but also on other places in the world. And for example, how the elites of these other countries, you can even look also at South Korea or or Japan, if you whether the elites of these countries really have the power and the determination to play an independent role in this. If you look at Latin America, I think it's astonishing how entrepreneurs, scientists, bureaucrats, the wealthy, how deeply linked they are to the United States and to Wall Street and American banks, and they save their money in dollars, not in national countries. Send their kids to Harvard and Yale rather than to their own universities and so on. So whether they will have the sufficient power and stamina to try to play an independent role in the world is an open question. It is only if that happens that something like, let's say, that Europe would have also other interlocutors in the world than China on the other side of the fence, or the United States on our side of the fence with its huge military apparatus and cultural influence and so on. So I don't know.
But I mean, there is something there, and there's also something I see that the EU and Europe has to offer, which is like another version of the stability the US does offer with its US dollar, and also with the idea of the rule of law. You know, the rule of law is something that gives a lot of security also to the oligarchs in other countries, right? I can park my money there and it will be safe because I can use my lawyers to get it. And the US is actually throwing that system out, right? With like confiscating the money of Afghanistan, the national bank, confiscating the money of the Russians. I mean, this is like absolute anarchy by now. And if there is some places that still have like laws that can be counted on, that would be a mechanism to say like, okay, world trade can continue functioning. That's also where I see the value of like neutral states and those who continue to provide these services to everybody to be a platform. We also see the mechanisms of the war trying to shut this down, because belligerents always hate each other and the neutrals because they subvert the system.
I couldn't agree more.
Is there something in Germany, about Germany, maybe Frau Wagenknecht, you know, the little peace movement that there is there something that gives you hope that, you know, the German political process will recover and will come back to Willy Brandt's Ostpolitik from this Zeitenwende abomination?
I would not have predicted the Zeitenwende, so I'm not willing to predict anything for the next few years. But no, I think that a certain fatigue with the war as it drags on, that cannot be precluded. And for example, Germany has a lot of problems on its own. If we are forced by the United States to cease trading with China under trade sanctions. And given the need for the conversion of the energy system to renewable energy, this all costs unbelievable amounts of money. Climate policy and so on, and then the question will become: really have to spend all that money for arms and to sustain the Ukrainian army?
And
I think that. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just one more question came to my mind, which actually has to do with the legal setup of Germany. If I remember correctly, Germany, by the four-power agreement, is still under this restriction that it cannot have more than 180,000 troops. That is still the case, right? So with all of this military spending that's planned, you're still constraining this to not a mini, but a relatively small-sized army. Do you see that this legal constraint, international law constraint, will play out and will keep militarism maybe a little bit in check, or is this?
No, I think that can easily be overcome, and there will not be 4 powers with which this is going to be negotiated. Maybe 3, and the United States and Britain and France. And the idea that the Germans should go first to the front is deeply rooted in this thinking. And no, that I don't think is a problem. What I think, as I said, is that people will feel an economic crunch if this war continues, and it will become more and more and more expensive. At this point, support may wane, and what may happen is that people will be asking the question that I touched on very early in our conversation. What is the war? What is the aim of the war that the Ukrainian government, which represents the utter right wing of the Ukrainian nationalist movement, what is the aim of this government in this war? Where will they be willing to consider, even to consider something like mediation, a third party coming in and helping them talk? Why not the Pope? The Pope doesn't seem to be very energetic these days, but maybe Lula and the Pope or someone else.
Erdogan.
There might, someone would have to step in, a neutral force, as you say, and help them sort out whether they really want to ruin their country, the Ukrainians, or ruin the young generation in Russia for a war, the outcome of which, in realistic terms, is basically already clear. Basically already clear.
Yeah.
Unless Frau Baerbock sort of manages to continue to tell her constituency that they will be able to watch the spectacle of Vladimir Putin showing up in the International Criminal Court.
At some point, Mr. Putin should invite the criminal court to Russia to say, like, okay, let's do the proceedings. No, that's a stupid thought. Sorry, forget about that. Professor Streeck, we've reached our time, and I would like to thank you very much for your insights and your analysis. And I'm looking forward to read more. Where can English-speaking people find your writing? What's the best place to go to?
You have to go to my blog. On the you just I don't know the address, but if you go to the internet, put in
the
my
sidecar
name, not the sidecar. No, the sidecar is the blog of the New Left Review. I have a blog myself, which is, I think, Wolfgang Streeck such and such. But you can find it.
I will find it.
And everything that I've published is on that thing.
I will find it and will put it into the description, because I know you from Sidecar and International and a few others where you publish, but I'll put all of that into the description, and everybody go and check out and read Professor Streeck's analysis on Germany. Professor Streeck, thank you very much.
Thank you.